working as a journalist in the Gaza Strip just basically labels you as a legitimate target. And it's not just you, it's you, your entire family, everyone around you, everyone you get in contact or in touch with, everyone is subjected to that targeting every single time. It wasn't just this genocide, it wasn't just this war. Even in previous wars, journalists were always targeted. Every single time we went to cover, even the protests that took place along the border fence, armed civilians and journalists covering those protests, we were sniped. We were attacked and directly attacked by drones, throwing gas grenades over our heads while we're covering, or shot by sniper bullets of Israeli soldiers that are deployed about 600 meters away from where we are. So this has been the condition for any Palestinian journalist inside the Gaza Strip.
And Matt Husseini speaks very powerfully about in our film The Dreadful Burden of realising that you yourself are a threat to the people around you because you're a target. Okay, I'd like to open the discussion out to the audience and invite questions. Who'd like to go first? Gentleman here.
I'd like to ask when Harold did, sorry, my name's David Cannon from Jewish Network. I'd like to ask when the UN went up to Israel and Ukraine are simply the cutting edge of Western imperialism, and is the UN part of that?
I'm not sure if anyone feels able to answer that one.
We have that question too.
Yeah, I think it's a question everyone. I've just realised I haven't gone through yet, have I? I'm terribly sorry. Just before we move on, this is Heidi Dagster, who is from the ICJP. She's a US attorney and a barrister specialising in international human rights law. She's chief counsel for the ICJP. And she's taken a number of cases to the ICC, including ones involving Palestine, which sort of in a way ties in with that. It's the degree to which Israel can be held account before international tribunals for its behaviour in the Gaza Strip. I mean, just from the material you saw in that film, Ida, how much of a case can be built against the Israelis from the material they themselves have provided?
And the West.
Well, thanks very much, Richard. First of all, for making this film, and to everyone that's been involved in it as well. I think to answer your question, I'd look to the applications for arrest warrants that the ICC prosecutor submitted in May this past year. So we're going on about 4 months ago. And there's a number of crimes that the prosecution set out in those applications for arrest warrants, all of them going to those fundamental principles that are part of the laws of war that make up the crimes that are in the Rome Statute. So looking at principles of distinction, proportionality, and also precautions as well. And some of the things that we've heard in this film. I think what struck me as I was watching this film was the amount of evidence that you've even been able to bring together just in this film. Now, when it comes to the ICC prosecution's applications for arrest warrants, so of course this is the prosecution has submitted applications, submitted all the evidence that they're relying upon, and it's now before the judges, the pre-trial chamber, to consider that evidence and whether or not to issue those arrest warrants. We don't know exactly the extent of that evidence. That's not public. It's been submitted confidentially to the judges. But what I can say from watching this film, that if just from what you've been able to bring together, and also from what I've seen that ICJP has been able to gather in their investigative unit, it's an enormous amount of evidence that speaks to these crimes, that speaks to violations of these very fundamental principles that I could go through in length of the amount of things towards direct attacks on intentional attacks on civilians, on civilian property and infrastructure, about using starvation and blockade of humanitarian aid and medical supplies to the civilian population as a method of warfare, and then flowing from that and using it as a method of collective punishment as well. And the prosecution has even brought it to assert the crime of extermination as in the context of starvation. Just even those are reflected in the information, the evidence, the testimonies, the statements, even from the perpetrators that we saw in this film, and that I've also seen ICJP putting together as well. So let me pause there, and maybe there'll be more questions on that.
I'd say this was the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we didn't have to spend ages and ages looking around to find this stuff. My job was mainly sifting stuff out. I mean, there is mountains and mountains, and this stuff wasn't unrepresentative. I mean, it's all like this, one thing we've seen, we did have in the film at one time, but cut out because there wasn't room for it. The thing you never see is combat, or hardly ever see. You hardly ever see them actually fighting Hamas. Which is sort of, just a very quick follow-up question to that. Do you have any idea why it's taking so long with those ICC warrants?
I think it's a question on everybody's minds. Historically, at the ICC, there's always this process of applying for arrest warrants, and the judges consider it. But what we've seen in the past is that for other arrest warrant applications, the time frame is usually about a month for the turnaround time. This is what happened with the arrest warrants for Putin and other Russian accused persons that are now before the court and other heads of states as well. So, very serious crimes against those most responsible and heads of state. So, we can't say that this is more complicated, I suppose. We are going on for 4.5 months now, and I think it is something that's worrisome, particularly because the ICC, one of the goals is deterrence. The longer that we have these delays and there isn't a decision on these arrest warrants, it prevents that goal of the court as a court of last resort being a deterrent effect. So the continuations of crimes that we see every day continue to happen.
Okay, thank you. Lady over there in the glasses.
Richard, first of all, thank you very much indeed for an incredibly powerful film. And I hope very much that it gets to be seen outside the people in this room who essentially are all on the same page. Just two quick questions, really. Susan, for you. You said something really powerful at the end. You said that this stage of the ongoing conflict in Gaza has shown the rules-based order to be one that really only protects people with white skin. If you could elaborate on that, I'd be grateful. And Victoria, everywhere I go and everyone I speak to, in terms of the general public, feel entirely helpless. They don't want to see any more dead babies, to put it simply. What can members of the general public do to help people in Gaza?
So Gaza has pulled off the veil, among other things, over these Western slogans of democracy and the rule of law and international law, humanitarian human rights, and all of these Western slogans that they've been pummeling the rest of the world with for decades. Just the example that Haiti was talking about, when ICC prosecutor Han decided to, take this up, he uncharacteristically, I don't follow things, but from what I've read, that it's not typical for him to announce an application so publicly, which, that application for, usually it's done and it's sent to the ICC for review, if I'm correct, right? But that wasn't done, and so in making this public announcement, he basically opened the doors for the UK and the US and anybody else who wants to lodge objections. And you know, I've said this before. Israel is an anachronism. It's an ethno-religious, settler, colonial state that's premised on privileging one group of people to the detriment of everybody else on a patch of land. And you know, that's something that that fits well in history. It doesn't fit well in our modern milieu, especially with these Western slogans that I was talking about. So now the whole world. I mean, this is something we've always known. We've always understood. I mean, as the victims of this violent, barbaric settler colony, we've always understood who Israel is, but now the whole world gets to see them. They get to see what we have endured for decades. And so there's this tension between what people are seeing and the response, and it's hard to reconcile. You know, despite the gaslighting, you know, there's all this. I mean, you read all the gaslighting at the end. We're the most moral army. We're being adhered to international law, human shields, etc. And the only way to sort of reconcile what we're seeing with our own eyes and this reality that they claim, this world that they claim exists, one of order and fairness and whatnot, is by lying. And this is the role of the media. And Western media in particular has played a really profound role in nurturing this Holocaust and allowing it to continue by lying, by spinning, by banning us, by silencing us, and in all manner of ways. And there's another documentary that just came out too by the Grey Zone called Atrocity Inc. that at least just exposes that first part of, you know, all the lies that the media has pushed on everybody else. But yeah, so it's just
I think it's a really hard question to ask. I mean, how you can help on the ground. I was continually asked by my Palestinian colleagues when I was working how the world can just stand and watch what was happening, and watch us sort of, you know, treat all these infants that have been sort of bombed and burnt. And it was very difficult for me because I felt while I was there, and still now even more that I'm back, that's not what everybody I know thinks. Everybody that I know and I speak to thinks that what's going on is absolutely outrageous and it needs to stop immediately. And unfortunately, I think what's being portrayed to the Palestinians is the party line. And I don't think the government speaks for the majority of us. I really believe that the government does not speak for the majority of us in the UK. And I think that we have to keep making that point. We have to desist. We have to boycott Israel. We have to let this voice out that we are not supporting this party line. We want an end to this. I'm sick of hearing about, you know, Hamas terrorists and Israel's right to defend itself. The bottom line is this is a human rights issue and children are being murdered. It's got to stop. And we've got to stop supporting it.
I think it's very interesting. I don't think there's any issue today where the political media class, which is pretty out of line with the rest of the population on a lot of things actually, but it's really out of line with the population on this. And I think the great challenge for everyone is how we convert that massive opinion to actual power and influence. But anyway, other questions? About the
you very much. Look, first of all, I want to pay tribute to you, Richard, the filmmaker, who has produced this devastating film, which I very much would like for it to be shown everywhere, so that people can really understand what's happening. Certainly in Parliament. And secondly, I want to pay tribute to the people on this panel who've been out in Gaza, have risked their lives. I commend you, I admire you, and I cannot thank you enough for the dedication that you've shown. Now, the point I wanted to make was about the question of international law. Many things have been exposed since October 7th last year, but one of the most serious, I think, is the way that international law, international humanitarian law, international norms of behavior have been blown up by Israel and by the United States. Now, I consider this, and I'm sure you do too, and everyone in this room, extremely serious, because what is to stop any other state, any other group from doing the kind of things that Israel has been doing and that the United States has been? What is to stop them, since we've created a precedent that it's actually all right? So to my question, which is addressed to our legal colleague here, do you not think that the time has come for the legal community to mount a campaign to actually protect international law, to make this absolutely clear, to declare it to everybody? I would have thought international law, which I know is not perfect, but it's all we've got. So doesn't it deserve a campaign? Not just, hand-wringing or regrets or something like that, which I'm accusing you of. But so that's the question. Do you not think there should be a big legal campaign to protect international law?
I think it's an excellent question, and I think everyone in the legal community and beyond is enormously worried about the way that international law is being disregarded. I think it's terrible to see such blatant evidence of this disrespect for these fundamental principles of international law, but then also the fact flowing from that there isn't immediate and universal outcry about the fact that those principles aren't being respected and applied uniformly. What I would say about your question for a campaign, I think there have been some efforts by the legal community to do that. There is a group of lawyers here in the UK that signed a letter in regards to the various human rights violations and international law violations, and emphasizing the importance and the need to respect that and to apply it. But I also want to say that I think one way that lawyers as well are expressing their concern and their adamance that international law is respected is by applying it and continuing to use it and to not give up on it and to insist that we look to the law as being the solution for preventing crimes and addressing them when they happen, and providing justice, accountability, and reparations for victims, and making sure that this doesn't happen again. I think it's completely understandable and warranted for victims and for the international community as a whole to express that we've lost faith in international laws, from what we've seen, that we've lost trust, and that needs to be rebuilt. But in doing so, in recognizing that fact, we don't reject it. We continue to use it and to build that trust back by using it and applying it in our cases.
Thank you. Rivka.
Hello, thank you so much, and well done, Richard, for a really powerful film. I want to ask about international law again, quite a specific question actually, which is the two sort of main genocide trials that I know of, the Nuremberg trials and the Rwanda genocide trial in 1994-5, happened after the perpetrators of the genocide were defeated militarily. So obviously you have the Tutsis defeating the Hutus and the Allies defeating Nazi Germany. How, and therefore with forcing the perpetrators to come to court through, you know, the defeat of the enemy. But what is the mechanism for forcing the perpetrators of Israel's genocide in Gaza to international courts if countries like the UK and the US are continuing to support them diplomatically, financially, militarily, and in so many other ways? You know, are there mechanisms for extraditing people, or will we see a situation in which Israeli war criminals are effectively in lockdown in Israel or in a number of countries that they're able to kind of travel between in order to avoid arrests? And could that situation basically you know, continue indefinitely? How will we be able to hold these people to account? When we talk about arrest warrants, who's going to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu? No one in Israel, obviously.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in identifying the fact that in past, when we look back at the history of international criminal law, there are instances where it's been, where, let's say, for example, the tribunal for former Yugoslavia, that tribunal happened after the conflict ended, and therefore allowed those trials to move forward free of the conflict in hindsight of it, and probably assisted with the arrest and surrender of those individuals to the court. When it comes to the ICC, if those arrest warrant applications are granted by the pretrial chamber, then what will happen is the pretrial chamber will send out a request for cooperation to all of those states that are members of the Rome Statute. By signing on to be a member of the court, a member of the Rome Statute, then you accept the obligations that come with it. That if the court issues arrest warrants and one of those individuals travels onto your territory, that you have an obligation to assist the court by arresting them and surrendering them. Now, of course, we know that the ICC can't physically force any state to carry out those obligations, but there are some remedies in holding states to account when they fail to complete those obligations. Like we've seen this with South Africa when Omar al-Bashir traveled to South Africa and an arrest warrant was pending, and they did not arrest him, and the court considered whether or not South Africa had breached its obligations and whether or not to refer them on to the United Nations or to the Assembly of State Parties as well. So I think there are diplomatic solutions, but then I think it comes also to the support as a whole for the court. You know, if these arrest warrant applications are granted and there are pending arrest warrants, that the international community respects the rule of law of the ICC and any other courts, you know, whether it's international criminal law, international human rights law, what we're seeing at the ICJ, respects the rule of law of these courts, allows them to move forward independently and impartially, and allows them to do their work.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing that beautiful and harrowing, I guess, powerful film with us all. My question is for Yumna specifically. I work for, I guess, independent Western media outlet. And we always constantly hear about the need for independent Western journalists to be allowed into Gaza because Israel isn't allowing them to, and partly Egypt as well. And I was just wondering, as someone who was on the ground, how do you feel about this sentiment? Do you find it insulting to the work you do? Do you feel like, I personally see, I think it's important to get Western independent, journalists in there because I think it's important for us to be able to
tell the world these stories without having Israel say anything about it. But is it an insult to your craft and to the journalists that are there on the ground already?
Well, it's not an insult when journalists they're demanding their legitimate right to go into an area of conflict, war, or genocide to cover that. That is the legitimate right of any journalist around the world. It's insulting when after all this life-threatening on a daily basis to us as Palestinian journalists and our families, that we would find other journalists coming up to say, oh, there's a lack of information coming out of Gaza because there are no Western journalists. And I know that's just a lame excuse, because you have abandoned your right in fighting that fight against Israel that has oppressed you and has oppressed the freedom of press, and you were not able to get that right by entering Gaza to cover that war. There is no lack of information coming out of Gaza, and the fact that there are no Western journalists in Gaza is putting an extra burden on us as Palestinian journalists, because first of all, we are legitimate targets for the Israeli army. We have any sort of protection, and yet we continue to work in very immense conditions that any human being can endure. And I will tell you, to be honest, it's not just our professional work that is keeping us going on a daily basis, every day like that. No, it's that moral and ethical responsibility and duty, because the entire world has abandoned Gaza and the people of Gaza. So we look at it as, how can we abandon our own people after we've felt that bitter taste of abandonance by the entire world? But yes, it would have been very beneficial for Western journalists to enter the Gaza Strip, but the fact that they did not enter the Gaza Strip is not an excuse that they are not exposing, with all that material that they have coming out of Gaza, the atrocities and the crimes committed by the Israeli army inside Gaza. Because at the end, when a Western journalist enters Gaza, he needs a Palestinian fixer, he needs a Palestinian translator, he needs to speak to Palestinian officials and Palestinian civilians, and at the end writes that story with a lot of Palestinian help. So his story doesn't get to be more credible than the Palestinians' story. I'm a Palestinian, but I speak your language as a Western journalist, and I'm reporting in your language to expose what's happening in my country. So what other excuse do you have as a Western journalist?
It's a very powerful at the end of the film, isn't it? You know, I've filmed hospitals, I've filmed the bombings, I've filmed the starving children, I've shown you.
Exactly.
It's up to you what you do with it.
Exactly. That you can never say there's a lack of information or anything. I mean, we always say a picture speaks for a thousand words, right? There are thousands of pictures and videos coming out, so there's no excuse.
Next question. Lady here.
Hi there. On war crimes, there was a recent interview with an American doctor who said that himself and all his colleagues had treated patients, children, with sniper wounds. And I know, Victoria, in your reports that you were doing online, you said that your last trip, you had a big increase in injuries in the under fives. Can you sort of say why you think that's happening?
We were discussing it while we were out there. It's sort of that age group from sort of 5 to about 12. There seems to be a huge number of those children that are quite severely injured. So they have, over 40% burns, loss of limb, facial injuries. And one of the theories behind it is that the under fives are often picked up by their parents and shielded, or somebody grabs them and runs with them. And the over 12s are pretty quick, so they can get themselves out of a situation and run away. So that age group from 5 to 12 is just unable to defend themselves, and that's why we see so many of them.
Jeremy.
First of all, Richard, thank you very much for the film. It's absolutely brilliant, and I endorse everything you said about Al Jazeera and its ability to report on Gaza. Without them, we wouldn't know what's going on. The question I want to put really is this about the arms trade and British complicity in it. I'm very pleased you had Matt Coward in the film describing what's going on at RAF Akrotiri. I've raised this question with Starmer and others in Parliament, as have my colleagues, on a number of occasions, that Britain, as a signatory to both the ICJ and the ICC, is knowingly allowing flights to go from Akrotiri to Israel, which we believe are carrying the bombs that have been used to kill people, and that British companies are making crucial parts for the F-35 jets and other things, and so the war crimes that have been committed could not be committed without British assistance. Now, in legal terms, does that mean that a case can be taken against the British companies that are involved, or indeed against the British government for its complicity in this? Because Britain is clearly signed up fully to the ICC and the ICJ. The US is not, but Britain clearly is, and therefore logic tells me something could be done about that. By the way, we have a debate in Westminster Hall tomorrow afternoon, and I've done it myself. We're going to be referring to the film, and also raise many of the issues we put here tonight. But thank you very much again to you and to all the panel for all that you do.
Just to correct myself a little bit, I mean, Matt Coward's work for Declassified. You know, quite often at Al Jazeera, I'll be honest, we're drawing on wonderful work that's being done by independent journalists. Matt has done far more work than we were able to fit into the film. And there's a basic point about RAF Akrotiri, which is clearly an absolute hub facilitating this war, and we own RAF Akrotiri, we own bizarrely, we own this little corner of Cyprus, and it's clearly playing a key role. And the answers the British government are giving, are not satisfactory. They clearly don't explain what's going on. But for the specific question, Jeremy, I'll start with you.
So I guess my answer is yes. At the International Criminal Court, individual criminal responsibility attaches not only to those who directly perpetrate crimes or order them and oversee them, but also to those who aid, who abet, and who assist crimes as well. And the International Criminal Courts, the ICC, and the other ad hoc tribunals, the case law has looked at the fact that aiding, abetting, assisting can be a number of things. That can be military support, economical support. It could be intelligence that's provided that allows for potentially crimes to be committed. And it also can be moral support and encouragement as well. So I think that anyone that's providing any of that kind of support needs to be aware. And the key thing is to evaluate whether it's another government or, as you raised, companies as well. Are they aware that crimes are being committed with the assistance that they're being provided? Have they been put on notice? And once on notice, do they continue to provide that assistance or aid? And that's when there is a substantial evidence that can be brought forward in order to include individuals from other governments or from companies that could also be held responsible for crimes at the International Criminal Court. I do want to make a comment on one thing you did say, because you said that you referenced UK officials or companies as opposed to US officials or companies. At the ICC, the jurisdiction of the court over who perpetrates crimes does not flow from the nationality of the perpetrators. It's the territory on which those crimes are committed. So any national from any country, if they are either perpetrate crimes or assist in perpetrating crimes that occur in that territory, are potentially, could potentially be prosecuted for those crimes. And those individuals don't even need to be on the territory. They can be outside the territory. We see that with President Putin, who's outside of the territory of Ukraine. Ukraine is the territorial jurisdiction at the ICC. He's outside, and Russia's not a member state of the court. So we could see that with the United States as well. And the last thing I wanted to draw reference to is the fact that we should also remember that the UK as well has its own legislation that incorporates many of the crimes that are reflected in the Rome Statute into UK legislation, and therefore, these crimes can be prosecuted in UK courts as well, and we should keep that in mind.
Richard, one of the aspects of this conflict that I find so sad and at times making me so angry is the utter, complete futility of it. I mean, the IDF campaign is little more than a barbaric, medieval, punitive raid. It's just designed to inflict violence on the Palestinian people. There's absolutely no attempt that I can see to bring about a positive political outcome as far as Netanyahu is concerned. So my question for the panel, please, is what do they think the prospects are for some form of positive political solution to this long-running problem? And can I throw in a subset to that is, and where is Iran on that?
Sorry, the time.
It's good to have you with us. Thank you for your inputs and the honestly, before the war with Lebanon started, I felt personally, as you know, there is still hope that some kind of ceasefire agreement could be reached and this genocide would stop, these crimes would stop, because I know for a fact that the people, they can't take it anymore. They have endured, they've exceeded the highest amounts of sufferings that they can endure as human beings. And a lot of people in Gaza, if you speak to today, they will tell you, we just want to die because we want to rest. We can't take it anymore. The fact that for Palestinians, committing suicide is prohibited is the only thing that is keeping them from dying at this point. And the fact that Israel has taken over the border and has completely destroyed it from the Palestinian side, it's closed it since May. And since the war started in Lebanon, it has been relentlessly ongoing in the Gaza Strip in different areas, especially in the north, where they are forcibly displacing the rest of the people. So in 3 hospitals over the past 3 days, they have been completely besieged: the Indonesian hospital, Kamal Adwan hospital, Yemen State hospital, and they are they're firing at these hospitals. They are forcibly evacuating the hospitals from the patients, the doctors, the displaced people. Jabalia refugee camp is under a siege now. Everyone who's trying to come in or out of the camp is being shot at. This has been going on for 3 days, and we're barely hearing about it even in the news, because the entire world has got their attention with what's happening in Lebanon. So that just shows you how much Israel is using that situation that is happening in Lebanon. And how I see it, honestly, is that Israel has no intention in militarily withdrawing from Gaza anytime soon. So we have 2 issues now: the right of return for the Palestinians who have evacuated from Gaza, including me and my family, and that's another nakba. And the fact that Israel would withdraw. So I believe that the upcoming period, whatever kind of agreement that they will reach, will be with a military existence of Israel inside the Gaza Strip. The basic plan for Israel now is to displace as much Palestinians as possible from the Gaza Strip, and that plan is being implemented on two approaches. The first one is completely from the north in Gaza City, and then that's when there will be some kind of agreement reached with Egypt to open that border and to displace the rest of the Palestinians into the Sinai Desert. Now, at the end, I'm saying this from my experience of how the political situation is developing in Gaza and on the ground and how I see it happening. I don't know if there is, and I hope that there would be a miracle that this plan is not implemented in this way.
Sometimes I feel frustrated engaging in conversation that assumes that our leaders are negotiating in good faith, or that what they're telling us they're doing that they're actually doing. It's very clear, we have plenty of evidence that nobody, except maybe Hamas, were negotiating for a ceasefire. Also, we can listen to what Israelis have been saying. Israel, for the past 20 years, has been talking about doing this. For 20 years, we have been, at least, as far as I can remember, they have been preoccupied with returning to Gaza, with the demographic threat of Palestinians having too many babies, of how to transfer large swaths of the population out, how to get rid of us, how to take more land. And Netanyahu himself has been angry ever since Ariel Sharon removed the settlements from Gaza. So it's been a personal thing for him. And the same thing, he has been upset about the withdrawal from Lebanon, because they feel like this is, God gave them this land, that it's theirs. So this has been the plan. And they have also said, we need a 9/11 moment to do what we need to do. And it's no coincidence that the conversation immediately after October 7th was this, soundbite of this is Israel's 9/11 moment. There is an enormous amount of natural gas off the coast of Gaza, worth trillions likely. It's in the northern part, the biggest field is, and so that's why they're really keen to take the north. As of yesterday, they have been issuing evacuation orders for the people who have withstood the past year of genocide in the north. And there are reports that they're literally just going through and killing people. So they want the north to be emptied. And as Jared Kushner said, they want that prime real estate, that shorefront real estate. So I think we need to listen to what they say when they talk to each other, not when they talk to us, because they're lying to us. Israel, I think the only thing that they are actually preoccupied with at this hour is how to make this entity that defies everything they say, they claim they believe in, that they hold dear, democracy and all the things I mentioned before, how to make this this thing that is antithetical to life, this racist, supremacist, settler colony, how to make it fit in a modern world. That is what they're preoccupied with. And in the United States, even, now we're starting to hear this very troubling rhetoric about how to adapt the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, how to adapt that to modern times to avoid what they call fake news. This is fake news in their mind. And all the independent media that where we get actual good political analyses and information is what they consider fake news. So these are the things that they're preoccupied with, and you can hear it because they talk to each other and they make statements and that are meant to talk to each other in conferences and things like that, not when they're talking to us. And I think that's where we can find what they're doing. That's where their aims are, and that's what we should be talking about.
I think here as well, now that Morgan McSweeney runs the country, you need to watch very, very carefully the legislation the Labour Party introduces about freedom of speech and, you know, controls on online information and everything. And you have to be very careful, as we're saying, about their rhetoric, about fake news and misinformation, because they are the ones who will define what it is. And I think I think it's still the case that in this country, drawing here on the experience of the Labour files, which I think in time will be seen as very prescient. I think a lot of sort of Guardian readers haven't yet quite grasped how illiberal this government is. It's profoundly illiberal. You have to be very careful on issues of civil liberties and so on. Anyway, next question.
Thank you so very much for really, really important work, and everybody on the panel for doing what you do. My question is regarding the role of the universities, the academics, and I realize that in this context, the issue is not knowing, the issue is not understanding, or the lacking critical consciousness. The issue is the political will, courage to hold truth, to speak truth, and the issue of how anti-Semitism weaponized and self-preservation. Also funding from the UK government to do international development in my field. So what I've realized, even scholars who have made their careers talking about genocide, writing about genocide, or even institutions like Genocide Watch, that's one of the supposedly reformist bodies, have not spoken for Gaza in the way they should be. What do you speak to those audience? For them, it's not lack of information, but there is something more going on. What do we do? I, as an academic, how can we fight back in our own universities?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of these scholars and institutions, and you know, they're meant to talk about everything. You know, this is about land acknowledgements and looking in retrospect, and when it's staring them in the face, people don't have the courage to do anything, because when it matters most is when is at this hour. It's not after it happens and then everybody can just, you know, oh, that was terrible, and just and look back and lament and again do land acknowledgements and all the other absurd things that mean nothing, that have no material effect in the world. What's happening on campuses is terrifying. I don't know what's going on here, but in the United States, university spent the whole summer imagining the most absurd and ridiculous new protocols to punish students, to keep students in line, to make sure that nobody raises a Palestinian flag, to make sure to actually monitor what professors are teaching in their classes, to create new rules that they're calling temporary, to prevent students from gathering, you know, in a certain, you know, more than a certain number, to prevent them from being critical of Zionism. There's a couple of schools in the United States now who have made Zionism and Zionists a protected class. So in other words, if you criticize anyone for being a Zionist, it's like you are attacking them for being Black or for being a woman or for being disabled. That's what protected class means in the United States. So Zionism is now a protected class at NYU and Columbia universities. And so they're putting all these new protocols in place to criminalize dissent, to criminalize free speech. And this is kind of what to the first question, what I meant by just pulling back the veil. I don't have a whole lot of faith. I know we've talked a lot about international law. I don't have a lot of faith in that, because at the end of the day, I do believe these are mechanisms that were put in place to serve Western interests. But now you have this settler colony that defies all norms, and the genie's out of the box. They're finally exposed. You finally know what we've always known. And they are going to, just like they're doing on campuses, they're going to do all manner of gyrations and new protocols and temporary measures and whatever it is to make sure that Israel is protected. Or if anything, maybe they'll throw somebody under the bus to pretend to do a theater of international law, to show some show of accountability, but it won't really be. So I don't think that's where change is. I think change first and foremost is from Palestinians, and it's from the resistance. And change comes from civil society. It comes from us. It comes from us really demanding and putting pressure. And I think that's where the pressure is coming from. It's coming from us because we know people. Not everybody's cowardly. People have been in the streets. People have been posting. People have been demanding. And I think that's where the answer is. We have to participate in this moment. Everybody has to. And I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that this moment, what the outcome of this moment will determine world order for generations to come. And if Israel is allowed to get away with what it's trying to get away with, there will be no limits. Chris Hedges said it best. He said, "One day we will all be Gaza," and that's it. You know, if they can show us a genocide, a Holocaust, if they can make us watch people running for their lives from one place to another, carrying everything they can possibly carry, traumatizing children to no end, watching brains spilling out of people's heads day after day, people being buried alive day in and day out. They can make us watch that, and then we fall in line. All you're signaling to them is your acquiescence, that you have no power. You relinquish everything you have when you accept this reality. And I think, to me, that's the bigger danger. I think that's the acquiescence or the apathy of the masses is a bigger danger than them, because I don't expect anything from leaders. I don't. That's not where the moral universe exists. It exists with us, and that's, if nothing else, that's the point I want to make, is that the answer is with us. I'm not, international law has a place, and there are so many tools to liberation, but ultimately it's in mass mobilization.
Hi, yeah. Thank you guys all so much, Richard, for the work on the documentary. Victoria, as of today, I was just checking, the death toll in Lebanon has surpassed 2,000 people. And so far we've seen people like Dr. Hassan Sitta go back there to help out as well. Do you see yourself going there sometime soon? And does the health community fear a similar devastation to the one we've seen in Gaza so far?
I think that going to help out in Lebanon has definitely been an option for a lot of the UK medics. One of the reasons why so few UK medics have gone to Gaza since the Rafah border closed is due to the restrictions that COGAT put out, saying that if you were part of an emergency medical team, you have to deploy for a minimum time of a month. And that's very difficult for a lot of useful doctors in the UK who are actually working in the NHS and carrying out sort of trauma care. They all have jobs. It's so hard to take a month out. It will exceed your annual leave. You're talking about taking unpaid leave. That's at the discretion of your employer. So that has cut our volunteers at Ideals. We basically had on our books in February 105 people that were prepared to deploy, and by May it was just myself and Graham. And that was just through circumstances that I was changing jobs and Graham is semi-retired, so we could go, but nobody else could get the leave agreed for a month. No, I don't think. I think that it's intentional that COGAT have said you have to go in for a month. Yes, I do think that's intentional. Just as I think that they've said you can't return if you're Palestinian, because a huge number of emergency medical teams at the moment consisted of Palestinians from some form or another. Most of the Palestinian doctors I know around the world came out to support Gaza and were there in the December, the January, the February, and then suddenly they couldn't get back in. And this is what happened to Ghassan, it happened to Abed Mokhalati, it's happened to so many prominent surgeons that they've just been excluded. So yeah, I think that was purpose. Again, I think it's on purpose that you can't go unless you can secure a guest house for your team. You have to have a driver 24 hours, you have to have an evacuation plan, you have to have satellite phone, you have to have a Garmin. You're only allowed to take one suitcase with you, it has to weigh 23 kilograms. You're not allowed to take more than one phone, more than one laptop. You know, they go through your belongings and they're expecting you to take water for 3 days because you have to support yourselves. So all of this has been designed to stop doctors going.
So just to be clear, who is it that's drawing up those rules?
COGAT.
Which is who, sorry?
Israel.
That makes sense. Okay, well listen, thank you. I'm afraid that's all we've got. Sorry. Please share the film, because God knows the British media is not going to mention it, the American media is not going to mention it. So share the film, talk about the film. When you share it, write about it as well, because it's the only way this gets through.